Did you know that the very first personal computer, the Kenbach 1 from 1971, sold for about $750? But only about 50 were ever actually made.
That few. Wow.
Yeah, tiny numbers. But fast forward just a few years, and you have these two college dropouts from California starting something, well, truly revolutionary, changed how we all interact with technology forever.
Absolutely. Set the stage for everything.
Welcome to Seeking History, everyone. Today we're embarking on a deep dive into the fascinating saga of Apple Inc.
Yeah.
You know, the company that famously started in a garage and somehow grew into one of the most valuable corporations on Earth.
It's an incredible story. Almost mythical in some ways.
It really is. We'll explore its origins, those groundbreaking innovations, the dramatic twists and turns in its leadership, and how it continues to shape not just tech, but, society and the global economy, too.
A lot to unpack there.
Definitely. Okay, let's get into it. From its earliest days, Apple clearly had a unique vision. So, the Apple Computer Company. It officially kicked off on April 1st, 1976. The main players were Steve Jobs, Steve Wozniak, and very briefly, Ronald Wayne.
Right. Wayne was there at the very, very start, but cashed out quickly.
Exactly. And their goal was incredibly ambitious for the time. Basically, to democratize computing. You have to remember, back then, computers were mostly these complex, intimidating machines.
Yeah.
Strictly for business or big institutions.
Total behemoths, not personal at all.
Right. Their vision was different. Personal computers that were actually user-friendly. And the beginnings, well, they couldn't be more humble. Jobs' parents' garage in Los Altos, California. That's where the first Apple I computers were put together.
Literally hand-assembled in a garage. And the funding story is classic Silicon Valley lore.
It is. Jobs sold his VW van, Wozniak sold his prized HP 65 calculator just to get that initial capital.
That's real commitment.
Right.
Believing in the idea that much.
Absolutely. So the Apple I itself launched July 76. What made it stand out?
Well, the Apple I was certainly pioneering. It was a pre-assembled circuit board over 60 chips. But the key distinction, the real genius from Wozniak, was the built-in computer terminal circuitry.
Meaning,
users could just connect a standard keyboard and, crucially, an inexpensive television set as a display. This completely eliminated the need for those complicated front panel switches and lights you saw on things like the Altair 8800.
Yeah.
Much more accessible.
Okay. So simpler for the user right out of the box.
Exactly. They made about 200 units, initially selling for that slightly odd price of $666.66. But the Apple I, while important, was really just the prelude.
Right, the warm-up act for the main event.
Precisely. The true commercial breakthrough, the machine that really put Apple on the map, was the Apple II, introduced in April 1977.
And that was mostly Wozniak's design again.
Primarily Wozniak on the engineering, yes.
Yeah.
But Jobs was intensely focused on the aesthetics, the case design, making it look like a consumer product, not just a piece of lab equipment. And Rod Holt developed this really innovative switching power supply for it.
What made the Apple II so revolutionary then?
Two big things. First, it introduced color graphics to personal computing. That was huge. Suddenly, computers weren't just text machines. Second, it was designed as a complete system, easy to set up and use.
And it sold well.
Phenomenally well. Nearly 6 million units sold over its entire lifespan, which lasted, incredibly, about 16 years in various forms. It cemented Apple as a major player.
Wow. 16 years is a long time in tech.
An eternity. And this success paved the way for Apple's IPO on December 12, 1980. That was a landmark event.
How big was it?
The company hit a valuation of $1.79 billion. Overnight, Steve Jobs, who was only 25, found himself worth around $256 million.
Incredible. That must have sent shockwaves through the business world.
It absolutely did. It wasn't just about Apple. It legitimized the entire personal computer industry as a serious investment in consumer market. It really helped fuel the tech boom.
Beyond the computer itself, were there other key innovations in this early period?
Definitely. The introduction of the floppy disk drive, the Disk II, was vital. It made storing and accessing data much easier and more portable than cassette tapes, and there was always that underlying emphasis on user-centric design, making technology approachable.
Who was buying these early machines? Hobbyists.
Initially, yes, hobbyists and enthusiasts. But the Apple II found a massive market in education. Schools loved it, and small businesses started adopting it too. So while they aimed for the masses, that initial base was quite institutional, data-focused, and educational.
So they go from a garage to a billion-dollar IPO in just a few years. That's dizzying. But the next phase brought new challenges, right? Trying to push the user experience even further.
Right. They were pursuing even more user-friendly interfaces in the early 80s. This led to the Apple Lisa in 1983.
Ah, the Lisa. famous for its graphical user interface, the GUI, that mouse-driven point-and-click thing we all use now, inspired by Xerox PRs.
Heavily inspired, yes. Jobs famously visited Xerox PRR in 1979 and saw the potential of their Alto Computer's GUI. The Lisa was the first commercial home computer to feature one. Groundbreaking stuff.
But it didn't do well commercially, did it?
No, it was a commercial failure. Primarily because of the price of staggering $9,995.
Ouch. Compare that to the IBM PC at the time.
The IBM PC was around $4,565. So, yeah, a massive difference. Plus, the Lisa, despite its innovations, felt sluggish. It was powerful, but maybe over-engineered for the price and the processors of the day.
Ahead of its time, perhaps, but priced out of reach.
Exactly. But the lessons learned from the Lisa and the technology developed were crucial for what came next. The Macintosh, launched in 1984.
The Mac, iconic, more affordable.
More affordable, yes. $2,495. Still premium, but much more accessible than the Lisa. They streamlined it initially. It didn't even have a hard drive option, relying on floppy disks. It had the built-in screen, the mouse, and ran System 1, a very early version of macOS. Simple, elegant, focused.
And the launch, that 1984 Super Bowl ad.
Directed by Ridley Scott, right?
Oh, yeah.
That's the one. It's legendary now. It wasn't just an ad. It was a cultural statement.
How so? What was the impact?
Well, twofold. First, it brilliantly positioned Apple as the rebellious newcomer, the force for individualism, against the perceived conformity of IBM, which was often called Big Blue. The ad depicted this sort of Orwellian dystopian world broken by Apple's arrival.
Yeah, I remember the imagery. Very striking.
And second, it cemented the Super Bowl as the prime venue for major advertising campaigns. It changed the game for how big products were launched. A true marketing and sociological triumph.
But, here's where things get complicated internally, right?
Indeed. Here's where it gets really interesting. Beneath the surface, tensions were brewing. In 1983, remember, Jobs had personally recruited John Sculley from PepsiCo.
With that famous line.
The legendary pitch. Do you want to spend the rest of your life selling sugared water, or do you want a chance to change the world? Classic Jobs.
But they clashed.
They did. Fundamentally different approaches. Jobs was the visionary, obsessed with the next big thing, future innovation, often regardless of cost. Sculley, coming from Pepsi, was focused on current profitability, market share, operational efficiency, more traditional business metrics.
So innovation versus spreadsheets, basically.
Oversimplifying a bit, but that was the core tension. It led to a power struggle over the direction of the company, particularly as Macintosh sales initially weren't meeting the perhaps unrealistic internal projections.
And this led to Jobs leaving Apple.
Yes. In 1985, after a boardroom showdown where Sculley and the board sided against Jobs' proposed strategies, Jobs was stripped of his operational duties. He resigned shortly after, feeling pushed out. Some say fired, some say resigned under pressure. Either way, the visionary founder was out.
A huge blow. Unimaginable at the time, really.
Absolutely devastating for the company's identity and arguably its soul.
So what did happen to Apple after Jobs left? That period from 85 to 97 must have been tough.
Incredibly tough. It's often called Apple's wilderness years. The company drifted. They faced near bankruptcy at points. Public confidence really dipped. Sales declined.
Why? What went wrong?
A few things. The product lineup became incredibly confusing and bloated. Too many models, unclear differentiation. They lost that laser focus Jobs provided. There was a lack of clear strategic vision. They were trying to compete with lower-cost PC clones, but couldn't quite manage it effectively. They were bleeding cash.
A real test of the brand's strength, then. Could it survive without him?
It absolutely was. Meanwhile, Jobs wasn't just sitting around.
No, he founded NextT, right, and Pixar.
Exactly. He founded NextT Computer, aiming to build high-end workstations for education and business. Really advanced stuff, especially the NextT Step operating system. And in 1986, he bought Lucasfilm's computer graphics division for about $10 million, renamed it Pixar.
Pixar. That obviously turned out okay.
Understatement of the year. He funded it for years, and then came Toy Story in 1995, the first fully computer-animated feature film. It completely changed animation and showed Jobs' knack for identifying and nurturing groundbreaking tech, even outside computers.
So how did he end up back at Apple?
Well, by the mid-90s, Apple was really struggling. They desperately needed a modern operating system to replace the aging macOS. Their own internal project, Copland, had failed spectacularly.
And NextT had a great operating system.
NextT Step, exactly. So in a rather stunning turn of events, Apple acquired NextT in late 1996, finalizing in early 1997 for about $427 million. The main prize was the OS, but it also brought Steve Jobs back into the fold, initially as an advisor.
Just an advisor, not for long, I imagine.
Not for long at all. The board quickly realized they needed his leadership. By September 1997, he was named interim CEO, or ICEO, as he famously called it.
And he started making changes immediately.
Drastic changes. Ruthless, some would say, but necessary. One of the first, most shocking moves was forging an alliance with Microsoft.
Whoa, the arch rival.
The arch rival. He secured a $150 million investment from Microsoft, and in return, Apple agreed to bundle Microsoft Office with Macs and make Internet Explorer the default browser. It stunned everyone, but it stabilized Apple financially and ended years of bitter patent disputes.
Pragmatic, if unexpected. What else?
Product simplification was key. He famously slashed the product line, drew a simple 4-quadrant grid, Pro Desktop, Consumer Desktop, Pro Portable, Consumer Portable, said Apple would only make one great product for each quadrant, cut models from around 15 down to 4.
That must have streamlined things massively.
Hugely. Focused engineering, marketing, everything. He also moved manufacturing offshore to improve efficiency and margins. It was a complete overhaul of the business strategy.
Okay, so he stabilized the finances, streamlined the products. But what about bringing back that Apple magic, the design focus?
That was absolutely central. He brought Jony Ive, who's already at Apple but perhaps underutilized, into his inner circle. They shared a deep appreciation for design. This led directly to the iMac in 1998.
The colorful Bondi blue one.
That's the one. Semi-transparent case, vibrant color. It looked like nothing else. It completely revitalized the Apple brand and arguably shifted the entire PC industry away from boring beige boxes. It made computers fun and personal again.
And this tied into a broader strategy.
Yes, the digital hub strategy.
Yeah.
The idea was the Mac would be the central hub for managing your digital life, photos, music, videos, connecting various devices.
Which led to
iTunes, launched in 2001, initially just a digital jukebox, a way to organize and play music on your Mac. But it quickly evolved.
And then came the device that really cemented that strategy.
The iPod. Unveiled on October 23, 2001.
1,000 songs in your pocket. Still gives me chills thinking about how revolutionary that felt.
It truly was. It wasn't the first digital music player, but it was the first one that got it right. The design, the interface with the click wheel, the capacity, and crucially, the seamless integration with iTunes for managing music.
It completely changed the music industry.
Fundamentally. It accelerated the shift from physical CDs to digital files and established Apple as the dominant player in digital music. That iPod iTunes ecosystem was incredibly powerful and sticky.
And Apple didn't stop there. The hits kept coming.
No, they certainly didn't. Next up, arguably the biggest of them all, the iPhone, introduced by Jobs in that iconic keynote in January 2007.
An iPod, a phone, and an internet communicator.
Exactly. It wasn't just a new phone. It redefined what a phone could be. It became Apple's core revenue driver and utterly transformed the mobile landscape. They sold nearly 2 million units just by the end of 2007.
And then the App Store a year later, July 2008.
That was the other stroke of genius. It turned the iPhone from a device into a platform. By enabling third-party developers to create and sell apps, Apple created this incredibly vibrant ecosystem and a high-margin services business model. It was a sociological earthquake in how we used mobile devices.
Suddenly your phone could do anything.
Pretty much. And just as the smartphone market was exploding, they defined another category with the iPad, introduced January 27, 2010.
The tablet computer finds its moment.
Exactly. It further diversified Apple's portfolio and quickly grabbed significant market share, creating a whole new market segment between the smartphone and the laptop. This whole period post-Jobs' return was just extraordinary.
It really transformed Apple from that niche computer company back into, well, a global consumer electronics powerhouse, ready for its next chapter.
A chapter that began, sadly, with Steve Jobs passing away in October 2011. Tim Cook, the COO, took over as CEO.
And there were questions then, weren't there? Could Apple maintain its innovative edge without Jobs? He was so synonymous with the company.
Absolutely. Huge questions. Skepticism was high in some quarters, but Tim Cook's leadership, while different, has proven incredibly successful.
How so? What's characterized his era?
Cook brought a more collaborative, inclusive leadership style. His background is in operations, so he brought an intense focus on operational efficiency, supply chain management, and execution. And the results speak for themselves, a period of sustained, almost unbelievable growth.
So what has expanded under Cook?
Well, the iPhone continued its dominance, becoming even more central to revenue. The App Store just kept growing. But the really significant shift under Cook has been the massive expansion of Apple's services ecosystem.
More than just iTunes and the App Store.
Oh, yes. Think Apple Music challenging Spotify, iCloud providing storage and sync, Apple TV Plus entering the streaming wars with original content, Apple Arcade for gaming, Apple Fitness plus Apple News plus Hull. Services became a huge revenue stream in their own right, moving Apple beyond just hardware dependence.
And new hardware categories, too.
Definitely. Wearables had been huge. The Apple Watch, which has become increasingly focused on health and fitness features, and AirPods, which basically defined the true wireless earbud market, plus home devices like the HomePod.
Which brings us to Apple's position today, still a giant.
An absolute behemoth. As of June 2025, we're talking a market capitalization around $3.01 trillion. It's consistently one of the world's most valuable companies.
And they hit those milestones first, right? $1 trillion, $2 trillion, $3 trillion market cap.
They did. Financially, they remain incredibly strong. High profit margins around 23% net. Impressive return on equity. And as you mentioned, services are now a big chunk, about 28% of total revenue in Q1 2025. That diversification is key.
Plus, all that cash they have sitting around.
Around $198 billion in cash reserves in Q1 25. That gives them enormous flexibility for R&D, acquisitions, weathering economic downturns, you name it.
So where is their focus now? What's next?
They're making huge bets in a few key areas. AI, or Apple Intelligence as they brand it, is a massive push. They're emphasizing a privacy-first, on-device approach, integrating AI features across all their products by the end of 2025.
Things like translation, smarter photo features.
Exactly. Live translation, enhanced visual search, creative tools like Image Playground, Genmoji. It's about embedding AI deeply and, they argue, responsibly into the user experience, trying to define that next wave. Spatial computing is another big one, spearheaded by the Apple Vision Pro headset. They're trying to build an ecosystem there, blending the digital and physical. And there are always rumors about future hardware, like the potential glass-wing, all-glass iPhone design for 2027, aiming for even tighter hardware-software integration.
Sounds ambitious. But they must face challenges, too.
Oh, absolutely. Several big ones. First, that continued dependence on the iPhone, still over half their revenue. The smartphone market is maturing, growth is slowing. That's a risk.
Makes sense. Well,
Regulatory scrutiny is intensifying globally. Antitrust concerns about the App Store, questions about privacy practices, potential monopolistic behavior. It's a constant battle that comes with being that big and successful.
competition.
Fierce, especially from fast-moving Chinese rivals like Xiaomi and Oppo in hardware, and other tech giants like Google and Microsoft building competing AI ecosystems.
And the supply chain, still heavily reliant on China.
Very much so. Around 90% of production. That creates geopolitical and logistical risks. They are actively working to diversify more manufacturing to places like India and Vietnam, but that's a complex, long-term shift.
One last thing. Innovation perception. Do people still see them as groundbreaking?
That's a recurring question. Some recent product updates have been perceived as more incremental than revolutionary. Maintaining that reputation for game-changing innovation is a constant challenge. Can they deliver the next iPod or iPhone moment? That's the billion, or rather trillion-dollar question.
It really raises that fundamental point. How does a company that has already redefined so much continue to define itself moving forward? What is its legacy, really?
It's a profound question for a company with such a history.
Apple's journey, from that garage to a multi-trillion-dollar global entity, it's just extraordinary. It really speaks to that consistent commitment to, innovation and user-centric design.
Absolutely. You can trace that thread through their entire history.
We've seen how they reshaped personal computing with the Apple II, how they brought the GUI mainstream with the Mac, completely altered digital music with the iPod and iTunes, and of course transformed mobile communication forever with the iPhone and the App Store.
Each one a major inflection point.
Yeah.
Not just for Apple, but for technology as a whole.
And their business model itself is distinctive, isn't it? That tight integration of hardware and software, the focus on intuitive experiences, really powerful marketing, and creating that intense customer loyalty within their ecosystem.
That ecosystem is key. It creates lock-in, yes, but also delivers a seamless experience that users value highly. And Tim Cook deserves credit for masterfully expanding that, especially into services, making Apple less reliant on just hitting hardware home runs every single year.
Right, diversifying those revenues while positioning for the future with big bets on AI and spatial computing, things like Apple Intelligence and the Vision Pro.
And Apple's influence, it really goes beyond just the products themselves. It's shaped design aesthetics everywhere, changed how companies approach marketing, and fundamentally altered how billions of people interact with technology daily.
That's a huge footprint.
Massive. And under Cook, there's also been a more visible focus on corporate responsibility commitments around user privacy, which is a key differentiator for them, accessibility features, and significant environmental initiatives aiming for carbon neutrality. That's also part of their evolving identity.
So as Apple continues its push into the next era of computing, integrating AI, and potentially spatial computing even more deeply into that ecosystem, here's something to think about. How do you believe that ongoing commitment to a seamless, integrated experience will shape your own digital life in the years ahead?
That's a good question for all of us to ponder.
It is. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive into Apple's history on Seeking History.